We're going to talk about the scandal at the BBC in just a second with Caroline Dinage, who is chairwoman of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee. But just before then, Caroline, I'd love to ask you just one question just about David Lammy in the House of Commons today. I expect you were there for Prime Minister's questions. I just wonder what your reaction is to the fact that he had the information at his fingertips but chose not to tell Parliament.
Yeah, I can't believe it, really. I mean, I sat there. His tone was very aggressive today, and it felt like he was obfuscating somewhat. But of course, at that time, those of us sitting in the chamber didn't have any information that he would have had, and to know that he had it and just repeatedly resisted the questions from James Cartledge to be able to come clean about it seems remarkable.
Yes, well, let's actually see a clip of what you very kindly joined us about, which is the BBC bosses who are under major pressure. There's more in this. There's a dismissive and defensive attitude when Oxford and Cambridge professors accuse the corporation of rewriting history to promote a woke agenda. There are calls from your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, that heads should rule for the Director General and senior executives following accusations of serious and systematic editorial bias. This all started 2 days ago when there was a clip of Donald Trump the BBC is accused of doctoring. Let's just have a look at this and then get into this in a second with you, Dame Caroline.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be there with you.
Now, see there, between Capitol and that's a cut. Here's what Trump actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
It's different. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that he then said the second part of the BBC's version.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we fight. We fight like hell.
Dame Caroline, what is your committee going to do about this?
So, first of all, we've written to Samir Shah, the chair of the BBC, but he also chairs this the editorial guidelines and standards committee, which this was reported to. This document was handed to. So we've asked him a number of questions, and then we've also given them a deadline of Monday to reply to that, and including we want to see a copy of that memo ourselves. It was a 19-page memo that was prepared by Michael Prescott, who was formerly an independent advisor to that committee. But based upon information that the BBC had gathered for them by a gentleman called David Grossman. So he did all these reports at the committee's request, and then nothing happened. And so Michael gathered it together and presented it in a 19-page memo. So we've asked for a copy of the memo, we've asked a number of questions in a letter to the BBC, and then we've invited Mr. Prescott to come and give evidence to our select committee, and he's agreed to come in next Wednesday morning to tell us himself the story behind this and the findings.
What do you think it says when our national broadcaster, to whom most people pay a licence fee, can allegedly doctor footage in the way we saw in the clip, can tell Oxford and Cambridge historians they're wrong about history, and can also report the Middle East in a way, certainly through BBC Arabic, which is not fair or impartial? Is this an organisation out of control? Should the Director General go?
Well, first of all, it feels like this is an organisation where there are really deep cultural issues all the way through. The BBC is our national broadcaster, and in a world where, I'm sure you'll agree that trust in media, trust in politics is at an all-time low, the BBC must be there to set the benchmark for accurate and fair reporting, especially in really contentious subjects. And the fact that they just don't appear to be treating these issues with the seriousness that they deserve, the fact that they don't appear to have taken the decisive steps that are really necessary to uphold that reputation for integrity and public trust is of deep concern. It's something that I know that the committee share my worry about.
And I believe, Michael Prescott, from what I've read and heard already is going to tell you, when you talk to him at your committee, the process of all of this, the nuts and bolts of who he raised this with. We have Deborah Turness, who's the head of BBC News, who told staff that it was important to make a distinction between Hamas, the politicians, and Hamas, the terrorists, when we know in this country both are prescribed and it's all one. I mean, when you switch on the telly at night, Caroline, do you trust the BBC?
Well, I think we all instinctively do, don't we? Because it's our national broadcaster, and we all.
Well, they can't rest on their laurels, can they? But especially when these scandals keep coming.
Exactly, and this is the big problem, you know, and these stories seem to be coming out every day from this memo. As I say, we're waiting to try and get a copy of it to see what's going to be coming next. But whether it was the editing of a panorama show that you've just talked about, whether it was this BBC Arabic, which was giving a platform to journalists with a history of the most extreme anti-Semitic comments, I'm told there's more information now coming out about their reporting of transgender issues. And you know, from one thing to another, there just seems to be problems, and that would be one thing if they were taking these allegations really seriously, if they were putting deep inquiries into every aspect, you know, setting up working groups, putting in place the checks and balances, putting in place the training and a really strong action plan to address this stuff. But the only comment that's come out of the BBC so far is that it just takes feedback seriously and it considers everything carefully. I mean, that doesn't, I don't know about you, but that doesn't suggest to me.
Well, clearly Michael Prescott doesn't feel that that is the case, and clearly you don't feel that that is the case. What about the regulator in all of this? What about Ofcom?
Well, we're waiting to hear what Ofcom have decided to do. I mean, I think Ofcom, as a matter of principle, tend to have to act upon complaints. So if they receive complaints that have been made to the BBC and they don't feel that they've been satisfactorily dealt with, then they can act. I think that's pretty much the process that they're in. But, you know, the fact is, as I understand it, Michael Prescott compiled this document based upon reports that were done at the behest of the BBC by David Grossman, who's a former Newsnight reporter. And then Jonathan Monroe, who is the news, one of the
very senior news executive,
senior news controller, then had to report back on the findings and, you know, and say what was going to happen. So it's not like this stuff is new or novel to the BBC. It's not like no one knew this memo that, and because Michael Prescott was so frustrated, he then compiled this 19-page memo of all the incidents that had been covered, and that's been presented to all the board members of the BBC, and yet we're still waiting to hear what action has taken place.
Let's talk again on this if we can. Thank you, Dame Caroline Dinenage, who is the chairwoman of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee. She's also the Conservative MP for Gosport, so thank you to her.